Hello and welcome to Simple Times Studios. Normally I do solo role plays on this channel, actual plays of various science fiction and contemporary tabletop RPGs. This episode we're going to do something a little bit different. Fellow YouTuber and writer Nick Carlson of Nick Carlson Press is having his 25K subscriber special, so I decided to do something special to celebrate. Anyway, for his milestone celebration, please enjoy this little horror short titled The Last Laugh. The sun had almost finished setting on the abandoned high school as a trio of college freshmen ambled up the main driveway and through the empty parking lot. The weathered brick building had been abandoned since it was closed a few years ago. Location and the inability to support more modern educational facilities were the reasons given by the city council. Now the students were bused to a larger, more modern school in the city, and the remote old high school was left abandoned. The perfect place for 3 college freshmen to do things they shouldn't be doing during the Halloween weekend. Deborah and Erica led the way, sorority blazers keeping the autumn chill out and flashlights cutting back the encroaching darkness as they walked up to the building, then veered towards a side entrance not visible from the road. Not like there was any danger of being spotted. Hardly anyone drove up this way since the school closed. It was a perfect place to set up their little nest away from prying eyes. Falling behind them, but doing his best to keep up, Marcus wheezed slightly from all the physical activity. His belly was squeezed inside a quilted coat, the freshman 15 making his clothes a tight fit. But the science major wasn't about to give up. Who would have thought that Deborah and Erica would have invited him, of all people, to spend the weekend with them? 2 up-and-coming members of the college cheerleading squad and him, a member of the university's genetic engineering club. The girls opened the side door and moved inside. Marcus followed behind them into the building. On reflex, he gently shut the door behind him. No sense letting a wild animal in while the girls showed him what they wanted to show him. Inside the school, Marcus was hit with a flood of memories despite never attending this school. Long, maze-like hallways lined with rows of small metal lockers ran the length of the building. Occasionally, wooden doors leading into various classrooms broke up the monotony. The fading sunlight and lack of electricity meant that the building was also dark. Marcus quickly hurried after the girls before they could finish disappearing up a central stairway that took all of them upstairs to the 2nd and 3rd floors of the building. Yet even in the darkness, Marcus could easily see how out of date the building was. The style of the lockers and the wooden classroom doors screamed late 70s or early 80s, with lots of particle board covered by lamination to give the illusion of real wood. The school looked like it hadn't had a makeover since it was built several decades ago. Oblivious to his thoughts, the girls continued on up all the way to the 3rd floor of the building before heading down the left wing of the school. Their destination was a classroom towards the back of the school. A concealed hideaway in a building that was already an extremely concealed hideaway. Towards the front was the old school's library. Just as the trio arrived outside the door to the classroom, the girl stopped and turned back to Marcus. "Marcus, can you go hang out in the library for a few minutes? We still need to get a few things ready before we can bring you in," Erica instructed with a sly wink of her green eyes, playfully teasing a strand of her long platinum blonde hair as she regarded him with a coy smile. Returning her smile, he slowly ambled away into the library. Walking through the worn double doors and turning on his phone's flashlight, Marcus browsed the library to see if anything had been left behind when the school was closed for good. The bookshelves were completely empty, their contents packed up and shipped to the new school. Only a handful of educational magazines remained behind, all of them perfectly preserved. "Did you get the stuff?" Erica asked Deborah after the 2 girls were certain Marcus was out of earshot. Deborah smiled and held up a small baggie with suspicious off-blue pills in it. "Yep, dealer was sure that 1 pill would be all we would need." 2 tops, even for a big boy like him. Slip this into his drink and he won't remember a thing afterwards. 3 weeks later, that's when we start sending him the notes. She cackled evilly. Erica nodded with a wicked grin and pulled out a bottle of rum with a wooden stopper and several plastic cups out of her bag. They were almost ready. Just had to make sure everything looked right so Marcus didn't suspect something. Plodding along, Marcus briefly scanned the magazines. That was when he finally noticed it. Sitting in the corner and looking like a lost Halloween decoration for how perfectly still it sat, a heavily mutilated human male looked at him with a broad grin that could only be the result of rigor mortis. The creature's skin had a noticeable dark gray look to it from either a chemical burn or long-term exposure to intense cleaning solvents in a poorly ventilated space. His eye sockets were sunken, giving his eyes a bulging, unsettling appearance. The creature wore a weathered set of red coveralls with a name tag that read Graves. At first, Marcus thought it was fake, some incredibly detailed decoration that had been forgotten about in the move. But then the creature's eyes moved to first look in the direction of the girls before turning back to him. Then a few seconds later, the creature's hands moved up and folded underneath his chin as he continued to look back at Marcus. As bewildered as he was frightened, Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but the creature cut him off by immediately bringing an index finger up to his own stretched and chapped lips. The creature, Graves, then darted his eyes between Marcus and the classroom where the girls were setting things up several times before floating up towards the ceiling and disappearing. Watching silently and trying very hard not to think about horror movies with psychotic grinning clowns, Marcus immediately turned towards the door leading out of the library and started quickly walking back downstairs towards the exit. He wasn't sure what that was all about, nor did he want to find out if he could help it. Besides, the girls were not as quiet as they thought they were, and the abandoned school wasn't the only thing with secrets. Climbing back down, he walked out the door and exited the school without incident. No worse for wear except for a fast heart rate and a thin layer of sweat matting his short brown hair. Safely back outside, he checked his watch. If things were going the way he thought they were, he'd give it an hour, then head back to his car. The girls would have either escaped or died by that point. Back upstairs, Deborah and Elizabeth had finished setting up their little drinking party and finally finished fussing with the spiked drinks for Marcus enough that he shouldn't be able to detect if something was wrong. The only thing left was to bring in the portly geek in and get him to take the bait. Walking out of the classroom, they quietly opened the door to the library and found an empty room. "What? Where did he go?" Erica asked as she frantically looked around the room and behind the librarian's old dust-covered desk. "Maybe old Mr. Graves got him," Deborah suggested with a sly giggle. "Really, Deborah?" Erica scowled as she looked up at her co-conspirator. "Do you know how much trouble we'll be in if Marcus found out what we really brought him up here for? And besides, Mr. Graves is dead. He died in that prank." She glared at her classmate, the mention of the school's deceased janitor sending chills down her spine. "Yeah, but you had to admit it was a really funny one. The bucket full of all his chemicals mixed together. Getting it propped up on the doorway wasn't easy, but it was worth it," Deborah defended, holding in a giggle. A high-pitched hiss like the sound of a tea kettle caused both girls to turn their heads. And there was Mr. Graves. Standing in the corner of the room, his face frozen in that jack-o'-lantern grin they found him in, his face bleached and burned by harsh cleaning solvents, his sunken eyes looking at both of them with a glint of gleeful malice. The girls both screamed with a piercing shriek that could be heard outside. Marcus looked up from his phone in the old parking lot. That certainly didn't take long. He pulled out a quarter and got ready to flip it. Heads, I leave now and send an anonymous tip to the police. Tails, he said to himself, his voice hesitating. Tails, I take care of whatever is left. He flipped the coin and was both relieved and disappointed when it came up heads. As much as he wanted the satisfaction of taking care of two drug-happy sorority girls himself, he had a feeling it was better to not get into a territory battle with whatever creature Deborah and Erica had angered. An hour later, a squad car pulled into the abandoned parking lot, and a pair of officers searched the building from top to bottom. The love nest was found, as were the alcohol and suspicious pills that would later test positive as common amnesiacs. The love nest was found, as were the alcohol and suspicious pills that would later test positive as common amnesiacs. But there was no sign of Deborah, Erica, or Mr. Graves. Just the words, "Ha, ha, ha," written in blood on the back wall. End of story.